In the enclosed world of a psychiatric hospital, a patient seeks self-discovery through painting, but as his artwork gradually reveals unsettling truths, can he face his past? What secrets are hidden in this painting that make him yearn for and yet fear returning home? Subscribe and join us on this wild journey. With my mental history, I was sent to a psychiatric hospital. They said I had an episode and tried to kill my brother. I didn't. I swear he fell. They said it may have been a side effect of the medication I was on or my psychosis in general. After many sessions with the in-house psychiatrist, I was allowed access to painting material. To be honest, it wasn't that bad. I saw my parents once a week, and I was able to paint. I thought about my brother a lot. I thought about that painting. He did for me the one of the door. I tried my best to remember it, and over I tried to paint it. Each time I stood back and looked at that. Something wasn't right, and I never knew what until one day I got it spot on. That's when I realized what it was off. It was the front door of our house, seeing it in front of me. It was so obvious. I peered at it from different angles. I remembered it all. I started to paint in all the little details. The room began to get cold, so I put on my jacket. I placed the paints in my pocket. When I was done, gazed in awe. It was almost real. I stared and cried. I wasn't going to see this front door for a long time ever. That frightened me. The longer I gazed, the more I wished I could just be standing outside it, knocking on it, waiting for my parents to answer. I pretended I was standing outside for the first time in months. I felt free. I imagined the wind blowing as the rains fell. I imagined reaching out to turn the handle. I closed my eyes and reached. I could feel the rain on my forehead. I could feel the cool air. I could hear the water slap against my jacket. I opened my eyes. I was there outside my parents' house. I panicked briefly before, almost on autopilot, walking towards the door. I knocked. I felt I must be dreaming. Then the door opened. My mother stood there. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Mom. It's your son." She tried to close the door. I placed my foot in the way. "Please just listen to me." She looked into my eyes. There was a recognition in them. She knew I was truthful. "Come on in," she said, confused. I saw a little boy in the living room. I knelt down to talk to him. He ran behind his mother's legs. I smiled, remembering myself doing that. I tapped my pocket, feeling the painting set in there. I knew what I needed to do. My dad is a chair. The title doesn't lie. My dad is a chair. To be specific, he's a fully upholstered bright orange angel accent living room chair, a kind with wooden legs. You'd find in any three-piece suit from the 70s. He's pretty comfortable, truth be told, a little lumpy in places, but his padding is soft. Warm too. He's always warm. There's also the telltale be thump, a thump coming from his back cushion, a steady rhythm at my lumbar. To remind me I'm sitting in no ordinary chair. He wasn't always a chair until last year. He was Kevin the accountant. He was 50 Ws, slightly overweight, and generally seemed to enjoy life as a human. He was married to Mom. He still is, but well, as you can imagine, it's a little complicated now. It was funny at first. He came home from work one day and just sat in a corner of the living room. When we'd ask him why he was sitting on the floor and not the 4,000 cream leather couch, he'd just smile and say, "It feels right here." It stopped being funny the morning he didn't go to work, turns out. He hadn't slept the night before. He'd been watching a movie with Mom, but hadn't gone with her to bed. She'd left him sitting in his spot, unsuspicious of the "I'm not tired. I'll be up a little later." Lee, she and I both begged him to get up, but he refused to move. Boned and sick at work, the whole deal, just spent the day sitting on the floor in his corner. We kept asking him what was wrong, why he wouldn't get up except to use the bathroom, and he just kept saying no, this feels right. Mom phoned the doctor around the third day of this. He'd stopped eating or drinking. You see, stopped getting up to use the bathroom too. Surprisingly, though, there weren't as many accidents as you'd think. Once he'd allowed the last of the food and drink to leave him, it seemed to stop coming. We also didn't hear his belly growl, despite going a day and a half without food. The doctor couldn't make sense of it. Their first guess was that it was psychosomatic, but that wouldn't explain the absence of digestive activity exposed by the stethoscope. They said they'd be back to take some blood samples in a few days after they liaised with some colleagues. Unfortunately, as I said, this was last year 2020. We never heard back from the doctor thanks to the virus that shall not be named. I guess guy with gut troubles who refuses to move is low on the priorities list. During a global pandemic. Somehow Mom managed to wrangle long-term sick leave with DS Company. Decades of loyal employee ISM, combined with Mom's attendance of every company barbecue and softball game helped Mr. Banif frag by. The unexplained stomach concern requiring hospitalization. Excuse. I'll never forget that phone call at the time. Dad losing his job was the worst-case scenario for both of us. He'd always been the breadwinner. Neither of us could support ourselves. Without him, we'd lose the house in under a year. Dad didn't seem too perturbed by Mom's frantic pacing, or the lies she wormed through the phone to Mr. Banner. He just stared at the wall, serenely hovering his butt half a foot from the carpet, balancing with his legs bent, and his hands flat on the ground behind him. That night I fell asleep listening to Mom yelling at Dad. He never yelled back. We started noticing the physical changes a few days later. That's when we realized this wasn't psychosomatic. Unfortunately, our shitty best insurance deal on the market doctor wasn't picking out the phone. We'd get passive, aggressive emails informing us they were waiting to hear back from colleagues. But that was it. This was not good, especially not when the joints in Dad's arms and legs had fused. The not goodness of the doctor's silence increased 1,000-fold when we sent photos of Dad's hands and feet flaking off like discarded spider husks the following week. Did the response change? No, we got a very snippy email about shortages on ICU wards and the critical international situation. Mom's shouting match with the chief of medicine, the one she demanded her way up the phone chain to speak to, didn't change things. We were on our own. Mom spent all her time in the living room with Dad. I'd help her wash him, try and make him eat, talk to him when she'd tire out and fall asleep on the rug. Every day of this routine brought with it new changes in Dad's body. It started with his limbs, as you can probably guess, when his hands and feet fell off. There was no blood. They flaked apart, crusty and dry and brittle throughout. Even the bones of his toes and fingers had the density and consistency of dead skin. The wrists and ankles they left behind were smooth and hard. It was difficult to tell whether we were looking at flesh or exposed bone. The dark shin surface seemed to blend into his normal arm at the base of the stumps. This discoloration would rise further up his limbs daily, and before long I woke to see Dad's head and torso fused to the wooden chair legs supporting my weight. While I write this well, I use the term Dad's head and torso in the loosest possible sense. By the time his limbs were completely replaced, the rest of him had undergone a slow, harrowing transformation of its own. His shoulders and the arms attached to them descended lower and lower. They found their final resting place at the Dad's pelvis sat squarely behind his rigid legs. The chest area they'd left behind had its own problems. Day by day, Dad's neck retracted further inwards. It didn't stop when his jaw met collarbone either. It pulled Dad's head deep into his rib cage. His face flattened as the skull supporting it sank, forcing his eyes to point in opposite directions. Eventually, they slid down to where his nipples once lay, resting glassy and vacant on his pecs. The change wasn't quick enough to break his jaw, though. Instead it bent outward, its hinges spreading wide across Dad's broad chest. Each morning I'd find Mom sobbing over a fresh, unnecessary piece of himself. He discarded ears, nose, his thingy, all of them flaked off and crumbled to dust in her hands. He lost the ability to speak, as his head withdrew. Unsurprising, though, right, he made his intentions clear before he went. The last words he ever said to me, "Don't cry. I am chair," always was chair, happiest chair. That was the worst part, I think. Knowing that whatever there was happening to Dad, he wasn't resisting it. That when he'd got that initial urge to sit in the corner and not get up, he didn't fight it, that he was happy this way, the implication being that when he was human, when he was a father and husband and accountant, he wasn't. Sadly, I still don't know why or how Dad became a chair. I didn't post any photos. You see, Mom wouldn't let me, didn't want the embarrassment, wanted to keep Dad's dignity intact. Thing is, I agreed with her and kind of still do. I'm glad I didn't go to the socials with pics of Dad at various stages of his journey. The temptation was there to see if anyone could help. Nobody could have, though, could they? Dad would have become just another internet circus freak. I've done enough research and digging over the months to know that whatever happened to that, he's the only one. Well, almost only. Mom's own changes started around the time Dad's skin was rethreading into orange fabric, and his eyes had hardened into plastic buttons. Her change was a little different, started in her torso, stretching her day by day, while she remained in crab pose. I must say she makes a great couch, for transformation may have been a little more distressing, but the end result is better. Sorry, Dad, it is what it is. I think the worst part with Mom was the despondency. Dad was so serene as he changed Mom, though. Mom wouldn't stop weeping, quiet sobs, tears that fell for a few days, even after her own eyes had become flat plastic. She wasn't crying because of the change, though I think it was because she wouldn't get to see how beautiful I'll look when I go through my own metamorphosis. Thing is, I get it now. Dad was right. He was chair, Mom was couch, I am coffee table. I always was. I was scared at first when I realized the truth hit me like a piano dropped from the Empire State Building. I was scrubbing the last of Mom's remaining human skin when it struck through every bone in my wrong body. Just as it must have done both Dad and Mom. I spent that whole night sitting on Dad, tears falling down my cheeks, staring at my spot. I didn't want it to be true. I screamed for it not to be more than once. I couldn't deny the facts I knew deep down to my bones, though that spot space on the rug in front of chair Dad and couch Mom is for me. It's mine, where I belong. Unlike blissfully accepting Dad and weeping resigning Mom, I fought it for a few days. I'm not like them. I'm only 17. I have had dreams, ambitions, goals. I wanted to go to college, settle down, marry some lucky guy, be a mom. I wasn't ready to give up my human form. I spent my nights begging for more time. Nothing answered the urges, didn't abate my awareness of reality. Now the illusions had been swept away, was too great. When I have slept this last week or so, my dreams have always been the same. I dreamt of true reality, of how I now know things should be. I dream of me in my place, my body elongated and wooden and flat, as is right, as is correct, as is natural. I have long, blissful slumbers filled with the feeling of hot ceramic mugs on my tabletop and thick carpet beneath my forelegs. I can't fight it anymore. I'm posting this here, but also printing it out to leave as a note for the removal guys. I want them to be careful with us when the bank repossesses the house and we end up in storage. Please keep us together if you can. We are a set that sick leave ended months ago. As you can imagine, the foreclosure notices have been piling up. I stopped caring about the pile of mail under the door around the time that Mom's rib cage split, and flattened into her wide pinstriped velvet upholstered back. I haven't been hungry in days or thirsty. I'm not even sure if I'm breathing now I think about it. I'm still scared, but I've come to accept that this is the way things have to be. I don't know why they just do. Maybe it's a curse, May. Maybe this house is buried on some ancient ritual site. Maybe it's just some freak anomaly of physics. Who knows, whatever the reason I have to suck it up and accept the way things are. This body, this walking wobbling mass of skin and bone and chairly bits that I love so much, isn't right. It isn't mine. I'm not meant for it anymore. Once I post this and print the copy for the removal guide, I'm going to get in my spot. Then it's just a case of closing my eyes and waiting. I can already feel my limbs pulling inward, my thighs and upper arms sliding to where they'll meet at my navel in a few days. There's a tugging on the back of my knees where they'll bend in on themselves, and all 20 of my fingers and toes grow number with each hour that passes. Do I have any regrets? Thousands. There's so much I'll never get to do. You see, to go to be. I can't hide from the truth, though not anymore. I am coffee table, I'm a janitor, and I accidentally participated in the Harvard wormhole experiment. They gave me $1 million to keep my trap shut, and I did for 15 years. But last night, I was making the rounds and I saw the professor again. I had a heart attack 3 years back, and I tell you, when I saw him standing there in front of room 204, I felt another one coming on. He turned and smiled, and it was like he hadn't aged a day in 15 years. "Hey there, Chief," he said, and that was it. I dropped my clipboard on the ground and hightailed it out of there, never looking back. What I'm about to tell you is liable to make me sound crazier than a three-horned goat, but I promise you there's crazier things out there. The cops don't believe me. The official story is that the professor and those students died 15 years ago, room 204 just up and exploded. They said damnedest thing, and there's some truth there. That room did explode, but it wasn't an accident. We knew exactly what we were doing, or we thought we did. They call me an assistant supervisor of maintenance, but really I'm a janitor and always have been. You might wonder why I'm still at it after getting that $1 million. That dough is for Junior, so he doesn't have to go through the same that I did the night this happened. I was assigned to the Astrophysics Center bit northwest of the main Harvard campus. Until that night, this was always my favorite beat. I mean, God help you if you wound up at one of the biology labs. Those goddamn dead-cut open animals all over the place used to give me nightmares, and really thinking back, I take those nightmares of mutilated and scattered organs any night over the stuff that has haunted me ever since. Anyway, I was there upping the hallway on the second floor of the lab building when the door to room 204 opened up and this guy popped his head out. "Hey you," I looked around to make sure he was talking to me. "Yes, can I help you, sir?" I thought he was going to about the room being a mess or something. "How you like to make $1,000, Chief, an hour's work at most easy money. Does that sound good to you?" It sure did. Things were tight at home, as they always were. 1,000 would knock off some of those long overdue bills. But I was also on a tight schedule. They didn't give you much breathing room. Don't want you standing around thinking about it all. "I guess that sounds great, sir," I said, but I got to stick to my beat. The man laughed. "We are about to make history, Chief," he said, "and you're worried about emptying the bathroom trash. Come on, don't sweat it. You won't get in trouble. I promise I'm a professor here. I'll vouch for you." The guy did look like a professor, but carefully combed gray hair and big old glasses on his face. I shrugged, leaned my mop against the wall and said, "Sure, what do I have to do?" "That's fantastic. Come on in, Chief, come on in." I followed him into the room. One look, and I should have just turned around then and there and told him to keep his damn money, but I didn't. As soon as I stepped in, I felt the little hairs all over my body stand up. I don't mean I was scared. I mean like there was an electrical charge in that room and I had a guess about where it was coming from. There in the center of the room, on a round table, was a large glass globe crackling with electricity, like what you see if you go into a kid's science museum. Like they somehow created a lightning storm in a glass ball. This one was sort of vibrating around on its stand and buzzing, and the lightning inside was black. I could feel the electricity coming from it from across the room. There were 4 kids there, students I guessed, sitting in a row of chairs along one wall. More than sitting. They were strapped into those chairs with metal things over their heads, like those big bowl things you see at a hair salon. They all had their eyes closed. I said, "What's going on here, those kids?" "Okay, they are quite fine," said the professor. "As to what is going on, as I said, we are about to make history. We are going to open the first wormhole." I said, "Like in the movies?" The professor laughed. "I suppose so, Chief." He said, "Now listen, we had a last-minute cancellation, but that's okay because it's an easy job. We are going to be kicking things off here shortly, and once they are properly kicked off, the wormhole will open. I will enter if I'm not back in 30 minutes. You are to pull that lever there and this will close the wormhole." I looked to where he was pointing at a big red lever attached to a giant warring machine that was hooked up to the metal bowls over the students' heads. "But won't you be trapped on the other side of the wormhole?" I asked, not that I had the slightest idea about what the hell was going on. "Just so, Chief," said the professor. "We've got this down to 2 possibilities. 1, the wormhole opens up to what we are calling the second universe. The best way that I can explain this possibility is that there is a different reality that exists on the other side of this one, the other side of an invisible wall. The wormhole will provide a door in that wall, and the other possibility that the wormhole will open to a place that man was not meant to go. 30 minutes will give me enough time to get in and out. If the first possibility is true and if it's the second, then you'll close the hole with that lever and my students will destroy my work." This was all way above my pay grade and my head was spinning. Why only 2 possibilities? How the hell did they come up with those 2? And if this real, why the hell would the professor take a coin toss chance of getting stuck in the place that man was not meant to go? I mean, those were just starter questions among the swarm that was buzzing around my head. "I see that you have some reservations," said the professor. "I assure you that your only job is to pull that lever after 30 minutes. That's it, Chief, we'll take care of the rest, and anything that happens isn't on you. The documentation is quite an order." He tapped a folder that was sitting on the circular table, "And here I'll write you a check now before we proceed." As he wrote out the check, I wondered if it would still be valid if he got swallowed up by the wormhole. I actually had that thought. As crazy as it sounds, it was still all so weird and abstract to me at that point here. He said, handing over the check. "Let's do it. Chief, as soon as I enter that hole, give me exactly 30 minutes on the dot. That's all you have to do." I took the check, humbled a thanks and watched as he walked over to the machine. He pulled the lever. There was a loud crackling sound and I watched in unease, as one by one the students' eyes shut open. There were no pupils there, like their eyes were rolled back in their sockets. "Hey, now," I said, taking a step towards the machine. "They are quite fine," said the professor. I assure you their jaws started to move like they were grinding their teeth. The professor took a jar of neon blue liquid from a shelf on the wall. He unscrewed the lid and poured the stuff over the electric globe on the round table. The thing started going crazy and then the globe shattered completely. Bits of glass flying through the air as shoots of black lightning zapped out into the room. I ducked down. I had enough by then and was ready to get the hell out of there. Then it happened. A black hole appeared in the middle of the room, sucking in the bolts of electricity. It grew larger and larger until it took up half the room. All I could hear was this rushing sound like the world's largest vacuum cleaner running at full throttle. "Remember, Chief," shouted the professor with a wild look on his face, 30 minutes exactly. Then he stepped into a thing and was gone. At first my mind was a mess, staring at that whooshing black hole that seemed hungry to suck everything in. I looked at the kids hooked up to the machine. Their eyes rolled back white holes. I guess they looked like their jaws grinding away like crazy. It was too much to make sense of. I looked down at my watch. 15 minutes and 31 seconds had gone by since the professor got swallowed up by the wormhole. My heart was pounding and I kept pacing back and forth, trying to work out what the hell was going on. Then I started to zero in on it. I was getting pranked. Not a prank like we used to do, as kids, setting dog on somebody's front steps and all that idiocy. I mean the prank, like the sophisticated college folk do, where they tell you something's going on. But the whole point is to just observe your reaction. Psychological experiment. Probably cameras in here watching me right now see what I do. 12 minutes to go, I saw a trickle of blood come down from one of the kids' nose. I leaned down to look at him closely. He was shaking a little bit all over. If I throw that lever, this will all probably stop. Maybe that was the test. I had to decide between trapping the prof in the black hole and saving the kids hooked up to the machines. None of it was real, of course, but they didn't know that I knew that. But then screaming in the back of my mind was that voice. What if it is real? 10 minutes to go. The professor had promised me that the kids were all right. Another one started bleeding from the nose. It wasn't real. It was a hell of a trick. Where did the professor go if not through that black hole? I thought about touching it, but whenever I got close, I was filled with total terror. It sure seemed real, like it really took you someplace far away from here. I walked over to the table and picked up the folder that was there, just like the professor had said. The first page was instructions to shut down the machine and destroy it if he didn't return within 30 minutes. I flipped that page over and the next one had a photograph of one of the students. I read what it said. It was a consent form. I, Jackson Stewart, acknowledge the possibility of my imminent death if I participate in this experiment. I am prepared to give my life to science. I flipped that page and there were 3 more, just like it. Now I'm no lawyer, but there was no way in hell that this experiment was legal if it was real, even with those consent forms. So it probably wasn't real. And if it was, then the professor lied to me. He had said that the kids were fine. This folder was telling me something else. 2 minutes to go. I took a deep breath and paced the room, watching. Each second tick by my mind was telling me that none of it was real. But my gut was screaming in horror. I just looked at my watch. It would be over soon enough one way or the other. 30 seconds. I walked over to the machine and put my hand on the lever. God damn it. Why is he cutting it so close? I watched the seconds tick by and I didn't know if I could do it. I didn't know if I could risk trapping the professor wherever the hell he had gone off to. 5 seconds. My hand was shaking. 4 seconds. Sweat was pouring down my face, dripping into my eyes. 3 seconds. One of the students started to moan. The one that I saw was named Jackson in the folder. 2 seconds. Oh God, oh God, oh God. 1 second. Jackson started to shake. 0 seconds. I tensed my muscles to pull the L1 look at Jackson, and I knew I had to pull it. He was violently jerking around now. Wait. I snapped my neck around to see the professor's head sticking out of the black hole. Wait, damn it. Then his shoulders were through. He turned back to Jackson. Blood was pouring out of his eyes. I'm almost through. The second kit started to shake. 1 more second. I looked to see that the professor was through. He was back in the room. Do it. He shouted. Two things happened after that. At the exact same time I heard a wet popping sound and I watched as the wormhole disappeared, as though it was never there, but I had never full deliver. I slowly turned to look at Jackson. His head was gone. Judging by the bits of brain and splatters of blood on the bow thing above his neck. His head had just exploded. The worrying of the machine gradually died down, and then it was silent. The three kids who were still alive stopped shaking and closed their eyes. A tragedy, said the professor, pointing at Jackson with the exploded head, but not for nothing. I've been there. I've seen it, Chief, I've seen it. I hunched over and puked. It was weird, but my first thought was what a mess I'll have to clean up later. I don't know. I guess my mind had sort of shut down and I was going on autopilot. I was the janitor. I cleaned up messes. That was all I knew. Then it hit me the reality of what had happened. You son of a, I yelled. You told me those kids would be okay. The professor put this sickening smug grin on his face. He would have been chief, had you pulled the lever at the 30-minute mark, as instructed. You told me to wait, did I? Yes, I'm calling the police. I had a walkie clipped to my belt. It wouldn't get me the police, but it would get campus security. I reached for it and had it in my hand. When I heard the groan behind me, I turned to see that was one of the kids. They were waking up. I went over to unstrap them from the chairs. The first kid's eyes blinked open and when she saw the professor, she started screaming it's okay. I said sure, it's okay, it's all over. She kept screaming. Then the second kid woke up. He looked right at me with wide terrified eyes. Get us out of here. He shouted. I'm working on it. Kid, I said, fumbling at the straps. They were untight. The third kid woke up. It's here. She said it made it through. Everything's okay now. I said your friend didn't make it. I'm afraid, but it's over. I'll make sure the professor pays for what he did to you and your friends. The first kid was still screaming at the top of her lungs. Get us out of here, shout the second kid again. The third kid looked me dead in the eyes and in a totally calm voice said that's not the professor. What of course it is. I said what I saw when I turned to look at the professor will haunt me forever. The professor's mouth was twisting around at odd angles, like something was moving the lowest half of his jaw randomly, or like he was trying to get a hair out of his mouth that kept jumping around. The veins on his neck bulged, then sunk back down, then bulged again, so that they were thick as ropes. His wrists were rotating in ways they weren't supposed to rotate, as his arms flailed around wildly. I had the first kid, the screaming one. She jumped out of the chair and ran to the door, but her legs were wobbly and she tripped over herself in the middle of the room. I went to work on the second kid, whipping my head around every second to look at the professor. It looked like there was something crawling around under his skin. Something big. Get us out of here. The second kid shouted yet again. The first kid was still on the ground screaming. I worked away furiously on the straps. If you believe in God, said the third kid, with an eerie calm, then pray. I took a glance at the professor, and that's when the first bone burst out of his chest through his suit. I call it a bone, but it was pure black and dripping with green slime. As for me, said the third kid, I do not believe that there is a God. Not after what I have seen. The second kid was free and made a run for it. I scooted over to the third kid, but watched as the professor reached out an arm and grabbed the second kid by the top of his head. The professor gave one quick twist and let go. I heard a terrible snap, and the kid clumped to the ground dead. 3 more black bones came out of the professor's chest dripping. He laughed and bent down to the first kid, who was still screaming, as bones began to poke out of his back like a stegosaurus from hell. What is that thing? I asked as I fumbled at the straps of the last kid. It does not belong here, said the kid. No, I said, getting one strap free. But what is? It comes from a terrible place where there is nothing save pain, endless pain, incomprehensible to our minds great. I muttered, as I noticed with a sinking heart that the screams from the girl behind me had stopped. Then I heard a wet crunch. I couldn't help it. I looked to see the professor tearing into that poor girl's throat with long black fangs dripping in green slime. I turned back to the kid, almost done with the traps. Just a few more seconds. What's your name anyway, Kid Claire CLA? I said, my mind trying to stay focused. When I get you out of these straps, I want you to pick up this chair and throw it at that thing. Okay, I'll do the same thing. Okay, then we make a run for it. Do you understand? Can you do that? I understand, said CLA. I do hope it works. I did hope it would work too. We have to make it work, CLA. I said, yanking off the last strap. Come on. We stood up together, and I reached over to pick up a chair. I hurled it at the professor with all of my strength, and it shattered against his boned back. I heard a terrible shriek then, and watched as Claire's chair followed behind. I grabbed Claire's arm with one hand and reached for my pocket knife with the other. The only way out of that room meant passing by the professor. We started running as I pulled the knife out and flicked up. The professor stood still, shrieking as the green slime mixed with the red blood from the kid's throat and dripped down his chin. I took a wild stab at the professor's neck and connected. I kept running with CLA, leaving the knife stuck in the professor's neck, and made it to the door. I had my hand around the knob when I felt CLA pulling away from me. I looked back helpless as I saw the professor reach long black claws into her gut. I threw the door open and left her there. Good God, I left her there. I made her outside the lab building somehow. I don't remember how my mind just sort of shut down as I ran like hell. I guess I did have the presence to go around and lock all of the doors from the outside. Then I got on the radio to campus security. You guys need to get the police over to the Astrophysics Center Massac, and there the front door started to rattle, and I heard the God-awful shriek again. Repeat, said a voice over the walkie-look. I said, call up Lawrence Summers right now. That was the president of Harvard at the time, and I had seen his signature on the papers in that folder with all of the consent forms. Tell him that the wormhole experiment has gone way the south. The rattling at the door stopped. I only prayed that thing didn't figure out it could just break a window and crawl out that way. This is the janitor, right? Said a different voice on the other end of the walkie. Is this a joke? The wormhole experiment. Have you been drinking? Call Lawrence Summers. If you don't, I promise you that you'll never be able to live with yourself. Do it now. There was a horrible pause. I heard the professor trying the side door, now shrieking once again. Then a fleet of black SUVs pulled up. 2 minutes later a team of heavily armed men jumped out and ran past me, breaking through windows and jumping inside. I heard a stream of gunfire and screams, so many screams, and the professor's horrible shrieks. After a while it was quiet, and the second team of men jumped through the broken windows. I didn't hear any more gunfire. I felt a hand on my shoulder and whipped around. A man was standing there. I don't remember a single thing about what he looked like, but I remember our conversation. Tell me what happened, he said. I told him the full story, the same one that I've told you. We are prepared to give you a lot of money to sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. It means that you can never tell anybody about what happened here tonight. How much? $1 million and a promotion. The man paused. You mean you still want to work here after tonight? Somebody's got to clean up the... I said, fine, of course. And one more thing. And what's that? Asked the man. I want to know that this will never happen again. I want you to blow all of that up and burn all of the notes, of course, and I want to watch, of course, said the man, and so I thought it was over, but it's not. Last night I saw the professor again. He looked me right in the eyes, flashed that smug grin and said, "Hey there, Chief." That's when I ran the hell out of there. The police don't believe me. I've sent a dozen emails to Lauren Summers's assistant. I've called every number that I found listed for him. I haven't heard anything back. I know who else to turn to. I'm afraid the professor is going to open the wormhole again, and I'm afraid this time he might bring his friends back with him. She's a keeper, and that's what my dad always used to say. With a chuckle and a pet to my head. She's a keeper, he'd say to a grocer or clerk at the convenience store. People used to fawn over the cute pigtailed gal, by her daddy's side always said her pleases and thank yous. Never threw a tantrum, was an absolute angel. Maybe this is why when I grew up, I always need someone giving me a pat on the back. If I'm not getting a compliment about how I look or how well I did at work, I'm going to assume I did something wrong, or I had a piece of lettuce stuck in my teeth all day. This hasn't always worked out for me. I'm a keeper, but I can also be a sucker, like what's been happening with my boss. I love working as a secretary. It's a job that makes me feel really fulfilled. This makes me a bit of a stereotype, though, with how I practically melted. When Jonathan Price, my boss, complimented my blouse and my work ethic on my first day, I just reminded myself, by looking at the silver ring on his left hand and the picture on his desk with his children, that I shouldn't read too much into it. Jonathan was perfect though, and over time I realized I read him just right. I never wanted to be the other woman. I just wanted to be loved, and being around Jonathan working late nights, just to have a moment to talk with him, having drinks after work. The inevitable happened. He kissed me after a few too many beers, and we ended up going back to my place. We slept together. I poured my heart out to him after that, how I'd liked him for so long, and that I really felt a connection with him. He just smiled and brushed the hair from my eyes, telling me that I was the kind of girl you didn't just let get away. Of course I believed him. Of course I swallowed the lump in my throat whenever I saw Mariana coming to visit her husband, my lover. Of course I ignored how I was the choice topic of office gossip, how the guy smirked and the other women gave me the side eye and the cold shoulder. Of course I listened when Jonathan said he was going to leave her soon. He just needed to make sure he didn't hurt her. And of course, whenever he called me to meet him at our typical meeting spot hotel in downtown, I was there with bell on. Yeah, I know what you're thinking of me. I think it too. I'm not the his bulb in the package, but like I told you, I'm pretty easily manipulated. But I love Jonathan. I love his work ethic. I love how he takes care of his kids that he learned soon enough I couldn't have. I wonder if that was part of my appeal to him, that he couldn't accidentally knock me up. He didn't love me. I was just an easy lay stereotype in every sense of the word. I only started wising up last week, when it occurred to me that Jonathan really wasn't slowing down his relationship with his wife, and certainly wasn't preparing for divorce proceedings. She was pregnant with their third child. I saw the pictures he posted on Facebook of their anniversary dinner. It hit me like a semi-truck when I read his status about enjoying their 15 years together, and couldn't wait to see what the next 15 will bring. I cried. I drank a lot of wine, and then I asked him to come to my apartment, that we needed to talk. Scary words for a guy, right? Took Jonathan a while to drag his as over, which by then I was even more drunk. I don't drink often and certainly not in excess, but can you blame me? I just had that reality-shattering realization. I was just his pet to call on whenever he wanted to and spew nonsense words at nonsense words I fell for. Well, I did what I should have done. About 6 months ago, I called him out on his said that he was never going to leave his wife, but he wasn't going to stop keeping me as his side piece. He tried. Oh, he tried to calm me down, but I wasn't going to back down to his pretty words this time. Either pick me or stay with your wife, else I'll call her and let her know the truth. My ultimatum. I'd spent the previous hour preparing. I felt super proud of it when I spat it out expecting him to pick at least one of the options, so this nonsense could end. Jonathan's face went white, then red, and then he picked a third option. He killed me. Jonathan picked up the empty wine bottle, while he muttered something about me being too much trouble, and then he brought it down right on the top of my head, gave my skull in on the first smash, sending shards of glass all over my living room. I dropped like a rock, but I guess Jonathan was just too pissed off, because he used the remains of the bottle in his hand to keep stabbing me again and again in the throat and neck. I was about decapitated by the time he came to his senses. Of course Jonathan freaked out, panicked, just washed the blood off his hands and wiped down the bottle before escaping the apartment, left me there all alone, head nearly off my shoulders, my living room, a mess of blood, wine and glass. Then you should have seen the look on his face. When I came into work today, I was at my desk by the time he came in. He looked like hell. Understandably, he just killed a woman 2 days before, but he froze in his steps when he saw me sitting at my desk, tapping away on my keyboard while scheduling another appointment later that week. I just waved to him real quick before going back to work. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Jonathan bolt for his office and slam the door. Oh, that felt so good, watching him be the one to run in fear. Was he doubting his memory? Was he trying to convince himself that he just had a really bad dream? I clocked out after that, complaining about a cold. It'd been passed all around the office, but I didn't go to my home. I went to Jonathan's home, nice house in a nice part of town. I saw his wife working in the small garden out front, and after adjusting my scarf, I got out and walked up the drive. She didn't see me until I was right behind her. Mariana was a pretty woman, even right now, with a smudge of dirt across her face, no makeup, and her auburn hair held back with a yellow bandana. I cleared my throat and she nearly dropped the flower bulb she had in her hands. She glanced up, immediately recognizing me. "Oh hi, is something wrong?" She got up, brushing off her hands and smiling from ear to ear. Her pregnancy was just starting to show, her belly just so slightly growing. "Can we talk inside?" "Oh sure, sweetheart, the kids are at school. W'll be back for a few more hours. Are you all right? Your voice sounds a bit raspy." "I'll be fine." I waited until she was sitting down before I began the most difficult conversation of my life, and I got the most difficult part of it out of the way first. "Your husband and I have been having an affair for almost a year." It was so sad to see how Mariana just sighed. "Oh," she just nodded. I figured, with all the late nights at work and business trips that didn't take him out of town. I was just about to hire a private investigator to start checking in on him, so you saved me a chunk of change. "Are you still sleeping with him?" I shook my head. "No, I figured that ended when he about took my head off with a wine bottle." I said, her brow knitted in concern, so I decided to show her. I undid the scarf around my neck and showed her what I'd been hiding all morning at work. My neck is a sight right now, all purple and black and covered in decaying cut-up flesh. I can't even imagine how the smell must be to someone not used to it. The putrid action had spread down to my chest, which I showed her by unbuttoning my blouse. I'd had to start tearing my skin off to get any sort of relief. You can't imagine how horrid the itching gets when your flesh starts rotting off the bone, with your skin holding it all in. I even removed my gloves to show off the pus-filled sores and bubbles forming in my wrists and fingers. Mariana went white as a sheet as she took it all in. It looks so wrong. My face perfect, as it always has been, but from the neck down I look like rotting roadkill. When the wave of stench finally hit her, she bolted for the bathroom. I could hear her violently throwing up from where I sat today. I'd just about buttoned my shirt back up when she came back, earring a bit and still looking pale, but managing to remain steady. "Wait, show me again." I shrugged and unbuttoned my shirt again. If she wanted a reason to barf again, She was welcome to it, but she didn't. She sat beside me, her expression of disgust melting away into a one of wonder before. Jonathan insisted I take care of the kids full time. I used to be a surgeon. You shouldn't be alive. You can't be alive. Are you a ghost? No, I shook my head. This just happens sometimes. I'm surprised it happened after your husband killed me. I thought I was a goner, but then I woke up with my body falling apart. Maybe I was due for a shedding. Maybe this just happens when I get hurt real bad. I don't know. Jonathan, she shuddered and shook her head. He's a bastard, but he wouldn't. He beat me with a wine bottle, Mariana. I pulled the bloody shards out my purse and then, when it broke, he stabbed me in the neck, all because I told him the affair was over. Now she was crying. Tears rolled down her cheeks as her bottom lip wobbled with her sobs. No, no, oh my God. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I never thought I need your help. I buttoned up my blouse, but I left the scarf on my lap. It'll take me a few weeks to really come back together, but my daddy told me of a way to help me heal faster. His sister was like me, fell apart, rotted like a corpse, and then looked just as pretty as ever. In a few days took longer, though much longer before she started working as a mortician. It didn't take any effort at all to convince her to help me. The kids are having a sleepover at Grandma's tonight. They really are cuties. There's a wine glass placed with sleeping medication ready for Jonathan when he gets home, and I'm waiting in the basement passing the time by ripping off more rotten skin, wondering what human flesh will taste. Like Mariana's already said, I can stay here while I recover. She wants to study me. I'm something she's never seen before and she's fascinated. She says I'm a real keeper. If the time stops at 1:09 a.m. roll over and pray that they think you're asleep. The title basically says it all. If you're wondering who they are, well, that's the strange part. It's your family or roommate or whatever. I've never heard of this happening before, so I'm not sure what I can really do about it other than pretend I'm sleeping. Of course, that's the only thing that really seems to keep them docile. Let me explain what's been happening in a little more detail. This has been going on for the past 3 nights now. I didn't really think much of it. The first night, I honestly thought my family was pulling some prank on me. That is until last night, when I was attacked by my wife. The first night was a pretty early night for my wife, Kelsey, and my twin boys, Eric and Aaron. All of us were out cold by 9:00 p.m. We had a pretty long day of splitting wood to stock up for the upcoming winter. That night I woke up to an odd silence in the house, like everyone had left, and I was alone in the house. I grabbed my phone and checked the time, 1:09 a.m., and I rolled over just to check if my wife was still sleeping. And when I found the bed empty, I sat up and looked around. The house was pitch black other than the hall light, but my boys' room we left on, and with that dim light I could see 3 shadows cast along the hallway wall as my bedroom was left open. Kelsey, I groggily called out. I could see all 3 shadows twitch at the sound of my voice like they were startled. Jin, I called a little louder. This time a shiver was sent down my spine, as all 3 heads of the shadows looked in my direction. What the? I whispered to myself, tossing the blankets off from me as I got up to investigate. I tiptoed to my door with a feeling of unease growing in the pit of my stomach. Once I got to the door, I peeked around and was pretty creeped out at what I saw. Kelsey and the boys were standing still as statues, with their bodies turned towards the boys' room. Their necks, however, strained to stare directly at me, huge smiles that looked painful to maintain, plastered on all of their faces. What the hell are you guys doing? I asked with a chuckle, thinking they were playing a joke on me. Now that I think back, it didn't make much sense, thinking they were joking after all. Why would they get up in the middle of the night for that with no guarantee I'd even wake up? Their bodies made an unnatural twitch at the sound of my voice, which made me jump back in surprise. This was when I really started to think something might be wrong. Feeling of dread washed over me and I began to sweat. Then the sound of the clock on the microwave, beeping as if it reset, rang through the house, made me jump in the air. As I let out a startled yelp, my boys turned instantly and walked back into their room, Elsie doing the same. Her smile disappeared and she walked by me like a zombie and crawled back in bed, snoring as if she was sleeping the whole time, confused as hell. I walked back to my side of the bed and checked the time on my phone. What the I said to myself, as I noticed the time 1:10 a.m. No way, only a minute had passed since I first woke up. It had to have been at a very minimum of 5 minutes. Still, though, I shook it off and got back into bed, decided to bring it up to Kelsey in the morning. The next morning I woke up and everything was back to normal. I could hear the boys playing in the living room and smelled bacon and eggs as Kelsey cooked breakfast. I got up and walked out with a smile. As I remembered their little joke from the night before, "Good morning, pranksters," I said with a laugh. They all stared at me with a confused look on their faces. My wife Finn finally said. "Last night, all of you standing in the hallway smiling at me, got to admit it was a good one, reached me out a little bit," I said, shaking my head. "Ryan, don't even joke like that. You know those creepy smiling people stories freak me out." Kelsey scolded. "Hey, you're the one trying to freak me out in the middle of the night." I laughed, "By the way, how in the hell did you get the phones to stop time at 109? That was a good touch." My whole family was looking at me like I was a nut job. Then simultaneously they all started shouting. It wasn't funny and that I was scaring them. I was bewildered. I didn't know if they were still in on the joke or if somehow they had all been sleepwalking. That wouldn't explain the time though. Okay, I shouted. I must have been having a damn dream. Jesus Christ, don't freak out on me. Damn. I turned and walked back into the room more confused than ever. I knew I wasn't dreaming. Were they this serious about their little prank? Or did they really not remember? Either way, I figured I'd settle it that night. I'd simply record them with my phone. If they tried it again, that'd ruin their little joke pretty quick. Satisfied with my plan, I went about my day. The boys helped split and stuck more wood, while Kelsey did some running in town before I knew it was night time again, and we were all in bed. I made sure to have my phone charged and right next to me, ready to catch them in the ACT once again. I woke up hours later. That same eerie silence filled the house. This time my adrenaline started pumping, as the feeling of dread hit me like a ton of bricks. I grabbed my phone and lit the screen up. 1:09 a.m. tried to switch it to record, but my phone was frozen. I yelled. I looked over to the hall and seen the same shadows as the night before, this time a little closer. My blood ran cold as I noticed out of the corner of my eye that the TV was left on, but the picture was froze. It seemed all electronics were froze or something, adding to the creepy feeling that engulfed my body. I got up once again and tiptoed to the door. I peeked my head around and had to cover my mouth to stifle a yelp. Kelsey and the boys were standing facing me directly. This time only somehow their smiles even bigger than before. Now that they were a good 5 foot closer, I could see just how wide open and bloodshot their eyes were when I moved my hand to cover my mouth. All 3 of them took a giant step forward. Naturally, I took a step back. They mimicked with another huge step forward. This time, since Kelsey was bigger than the boys, she stepped ahead. Has anyone heard of this city? No one seems to remember it, and something horrific might have happened to it. Apparently there was once a city in the north of Sweden called Corona, but somehow we've all forgotten about it. I'm a police officer working in Kollex municipality close to where the lost city of Corona is supposed to have been. At that place there are no signs of the city, only a dense forest, but certain details related to my own family makes me certain this place was indeed real. The entire world just forgot about it. I can't imagine how or why, but it's the only conclusion I've been able to reach for me. This all started when 2 Romanian blueberry pickers came into my small office to report something they had found deep in the dense forest. They didn't know enough Swedish or English to explain exactly what it was that they had found, but it was immediately clear to me that it had terrified them completely from what I understood seemed to involve a human corpse. Eventually, after having brought in an interpreter from the town next to mine, it was revealed that they had stumbled upon a dead child no more than 10 years old. They led me and 2 of my colleagues followed by an ambulance to the location where they had found the child. The sun was setting behind a thick mist. When we got there, I lit a cigarette while we left the main road and walked into the forest to where the child was supposed to be. I felt a bit uncomfortable having to deal with a dead child, but I had handled cases like this before, some car accidents, and didn't feel too affected by it. Now it was just another job or so. I thought the Romanians stopped when we got close and refused to go any further. There was panic in their eyes more than I expected, even given these extreme circumstances. One of my colleagues stayed with them while the rest of us continued. We soon came upon a huge boulder that had been placed there by the ice sheet that covered Europe during the Ice Age. My colleague walked around it and a few moments later he came running back pale, as if he had seen the devil himself. He bent down and puked right in front of me. He said it's on the other side, holy. I didn't ask him any questions. I only proceeded to check it out for myself, with the medics following behind me. What we found on the other side of the boulder wasn't natural. Half the child blonde little girl was fused with the boulder, just as if she had been passing through it as a ghost and then suddenly turned into a human before she had time to exit the rock, or, as my colleague later remarked, it was as if she had been teleported into the rock. The girl's sorrowful dead gaze into the forest seemed to tell a story of a tragedy unknown to the living. The medics quickly shied away from her eyes and said silence, horrified by the fate she must have suffered, but I couldn't look away. I've never been a religious man, but this experience made me doubt everything I'd believed before, and I don't just mean the bizarre way the poor girl had lost her life half engulfed by the boulder. There was something else about the girl as well, something that made me feel completely empty inside, just as if a piece of my own soul was ripped out of me, leaving an empty hole in my heart that quickly filled up with a sorrow I had never felt before. It was a dreadful feeling, only made worse by the strange fact that a small part of me recognized the girl. I couldn't tell from where her face was, like the vague memory of a dream recently forgotten. We collected ourselves and started talking, trying to make sense of the situation, without any success. While the medics approached the body, I tried to focus on the hard facts. While we investigated the scene, the girl was wearing a pink jacket. In one of the pockets we found an oddle-looking flower. Subscribe and never miss out on our fantastic videos.